it's changed our life completely. What did you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It's changed our outlook on life. It's changed, I mean, just our daily activities. Now, lots of pills and lots of doctor's appointments, and we have to be a lot more cautious about um, being in the sun, being in the heat, how much water he drinks, how close he is to restrooms. Now with the COVID, we have to keep him away from people because we're scared of him, just how it would affect him because of what he's been through. So I guess we're a lot more cautious. Um, I would say that's the biggest change, don't you think? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was
Really, our connection is through Sue because Sue, I don't even really know what her title is. I guess she's like a coordinator at Mayo, and she's the person that coordinated all of our appointments and helped us get into the Hope Lodge. And she was there just to be a shoulder to cry on, a friend. Everything that we needed, Sue helped us with. And so it was kind of like an indirect connection to the organization. And we went to one meeting because we just happened to be there during the time that they were having the meeting because they have them at the Hope Lodge. So we got to attend one meeting, which was really neat because that was the first time we'd ever been together with a group of people that had brain tumors. So yeah, that's really the best connection, I think. So it just so happened that particular meeting, they didn't have a physician. And Sue told me they usually have a physician there. And I don't remember why, but for whatever reason, he couldn't be there for that particular month. But I felt like the biggest takeaway for me was just hearing other people's stories and what they've been through personally, because it made me recognize how incredibly lucky we are. And it also just gives you this sense of camaraderie that you're not alone. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, just what you said.
ditto?
Yeah. So we started noticing that there was something wrong. So I'll back up a little. So we live in Jacksonville, Florida, and in 2017, I don't remember which hurricane it was. It was either Irma or Matthew. It might have been Matthew, but I really don't know. There was a hurricane coming, and my husband owns a tree company. And so it was a very, very stressful, chaotic time leading up to that hurricane. And I started to notice, like right around the time of the hurricane and immediately after, that he started to get a lot more forgetful and he seemed confused and he was really, really, really tired. And it was going through a hurricane and owning a tree company is a blessing and it's an absolute nightmare at the same time because you are so incredibly busy and it's overwhelming when it actually hits your city. And that's what we were going through because our company is very small and we were completely overwhelmed. And I thought that his symptoms was just that intense pressure that we were under. And so we got through the worst of it. We got through all of those jobs and it took us probably 2 months to get through all those jobs. And I think the storm hit like the first week of September and it took us until November until we were completely through that log. And his fatigue kept getting worse, and his confusion was getting worse. His forgetfulness was getting worse. And I thought it was just because he was completely burned out. And then he started, he complained about headaches, but he had always complained about headaches since I've known him. So I didn't realize, and I wasn't monitoring, how much Excedrin he was taking. So I had no idea that he was taking that amount of medication. And he just got more and more tired and lethargic, and he wasn't interested in work anymore at all, and work is his life. And in November, he started complaining that he couldn't see, it was like he had tunnel vision. Like the way he described it is he couldn't see out the sides. And I thought, okay, maybe he has glaucoma, which I don't know why I thought he had glaucoma, but I thought he had glaucoma. And so we started going to doctors, and I started Googling different symptoms, and it seems ridiculous now, but I thought he had a sleep disorder because he started like talking in his sleep, but it didn't make any sense what he was saying. And he was getting almost kind of hard to wake up. So I thought he had a sleep disorder. I thought that he had something like weird age-related with his eyes. I thought that, at one point I thought he was having a midlife crisis because he started acting different. And he started just, I don't know, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And we had been to a couple doctors. We hadn't gotten any answers yet. One doctor told us that he thought that it was mold because our Florida room flooded during the storm. So he thought that he had some sort of weird disease from mold. And I took him he had a couple of wisdom teeth that the dentist said needed to come out. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's it. Like, I don't know why I would think that, but I did. So we had the wisdom teeth taken out. He went to an eye doctor. And we were actually waiting for our insurance company to approve him getting an MRI. And he woke up in the middle of the night one night, and he had no earthly idea who I was or where he was. And so I started asking him questions, and I asked him what his address was, and he rattled off an address that he told me later was an address from like 20 years ago. And so that's when I knew something was definitely really, really, really wrong. So I took him to the ER. That was January 25th, 2018. And that's the day that we found out. That was a really, really, really long answer. I'm sorry.
No.
So, okay. So I was shocked and I was terrified when he woke up and had no idea who I was. So I took him to the ER, and the very first thing they did was an MRI, because when we walked into the ER, there was like this triage, right? And there was these two paramedics sitting there. And I walked up to them and I started to explain to him that the two people, this is my husband, woke up in the middle of the night and he had no idea who he is, and I'm terrified. And Kevin started talking to them like he was a paramedic and I was his patient. And so they knew immediately something was really, really wrong. And so they took him to have an MRI immediately. So they knew immediately. But then they waited I think we were there probably 10 or 11 hours before they finally told me. But they knew immediately, because that was the very first test they did. And so we were still in the ER. And it was like that triage area, I guess, of an ER where it's like there's just curtains between you and the next person, and so there's really no privacy. And this group, it was like an army of doctors and nurses, and I have no idea who they were, but they all like marched in together to tell me. And by that point, they wouldn't let Kevin have anything to eat or drink, and they wouldn't let him have any medicine at all. So that's when I realized how bad the headaches actually were, because he was like moaning and crying out. You know, he was in so much pain, and I was completely panicked at this point because I knew there was something really, really, really wrong by this point. So when they all walked in to tell me, they said he had a lesion on his brain. And I was like, what is that? Is that a cut? Does he have a cut on his brain? I didn't understand what a lesion was. And then one of them said, it's a tumor. It's a brain tumor. He has a brain tumor. And it blew my mind. Like, because you just, you know, even after all of those red flags that I should have caught, it's not something you would ever think, you know? I mean, he climbs trees for a living. He was healthy as a horse. He was strong. I mean, he was smart. He'd run a business by himself for 20 years. So it never occurred to me that it could be a brain tumor. And they said, you know, obviously they hadn't done the surgery yet, so they didn't know what type of tumor it was, but they said then that it was likely a craniopharyngioma. So I started Googling, and I started, you know, piecing together what that was almost immediately. Of course, I had no experience with brain tumors prior to this, so I immediately thought he was going to die. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of when they told us, okay, my husband's dying. They just told me my husband's dying because he has a brain tumor. I had no idea, no earthly idea. So, you know, it wasn't until like, you know, weeks later and obviously months later that I really truly understood what that was, what a craniopharyngioma actually was. So it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. And it was just this almost shell shock because you don't believe it's true. You can't believe it's true. And then as it went on, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So, yeah, it sucked.
Well, we were at that hospital for a week, only for them to tell us that
Yeah.
they couldn't do nothing for us. And then,
Yeah.
you know, more or less, Mayo took us as an experiment or a challenge because our insurance didn't even, you know, Mayo wasn't insurance
Well,
or whatever it was.
so I just took him to the closest ER, which is our local community hospital. It's right around the corner from our house. That's where I'd taken him. And it's a smaller hospital facility. They have a really small neurosurgery department. They only had like one neurosurgeon, one guy. And so we sat there for a week. They wouldn't let us leave. They wouldn't discharge us because he was already at that point where they had to do something immediately, but they didn't know what they were going to do because they couldn't actually do anything. They weren't equipped to do anything. And at first that surgeon had talked about going in through his forehead and his eye socket. And I mean, just the whole thing is just, it's terrifying. You're going to go into my husband's brain. And then they eventually told us, after we sat there for a week, terrified, not knowing what was going on. We were in the ICU the whole time. They were like, okay, well, we can't treat you. You have to go to another hospital. And so we were supposed to go to one hospital, and everything was all set up for us to go. And then
Gainesville.
Yeah, you're not supposed to tell me that. Okay, so but we were supposed to go to one hospital that had a much bigger neurosurgery department. And at the very, very last minute, we were literally waiting for the ambulance to come pick us up to take us there because it's in another city. And they were like, sorry, your insurance company said no. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, no, he's about to die. Well, what are you talking about? And they said, no, they're not going to cover it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I'll sell my house. I'll do whatever. I mean, just take him, get this thing out of his brain. And they said, no. So then we sat there for another day or two after that and they were trying to figure out what the heck they were going to do. So we were given two options. One was the Mayo Clinic and one was another hospital, Jacksonville, that's a trauma, a trauma level 1 trauma center. And I chose Mayo. And I chose Mayo because I already knew about Mayo because my mom has epilepsy. And so I knew they have an amazing neurology department and amazing doctors. So I think that I told them Mayo, and either that night or the next morning we were at Mayo, and it was like a Saturday, and the surgery was already scheduled for Monday. So there's so many different types of brain tumors. You know, and I think most people relate brain tumors to the glioblastoma because that's what you hear about in the news. But there's so many more types of brain tumors. So, you know, the first thing I thought of when they told me he had a brain tumor was that he's dying. I immediately thought it's cancer and he's dying. And you know, I've paid a lot more attention since then when I hear about other people having brain tumors in the news, and I always try to find out what type of brain tumor they have. But you know, the people at that very first hospital we were at, when they first told me it was a brain tumor, they tried to tell me it was treatable. They tried telling me, but I couldn't even hear it because all I could hear was brain tumor. That's all I heard. So I wish that there was more information in general about like the specific different types of brain tumors so that you could understand what you faced, because it is different. Different brain tumors affect different types of the brain. They have different symptoms. There are, I mean, varying degrees of outcomes. They're all very, 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 very different. And so that's one thing that I wish. And, you know, not that they did anything wrong. They really didn't, because I don't know that they knew that much about it, because the type of tumor he has is a papillary craniopharyngioma, and it's relatively rare, particularly the papillary type. So, you know, at that particular hospital, they probably didn't know that much to tell me. So, and, you know, I think that like his neurosurgeon at Mayo, I think he tried to be really optimistic about what the outcome was going to be. But of course he didn't know what the outcome was going to be, because, you know, at one point I asked him, is he going to be able to walk again? Is he going to talk like normal? Is he going to be able to function like normal? And all he could say was, I don't know. I don't know. And I know he didn't, and I know he didn't want to tell me things that, you know, he knew weren't going to happen, or he wasn't sure. But I guess I wish that they had been able to just prep us a little bit more for what was ahead, because when we had the first surgery, he told us there was a less than 5% chance of having a CSF leak because they went in through his nose. And he said, you know, I got to tell you this, but chances are this is not going to happen to you. Well, sure enough, I think it was 2 or 3 days later, after we'd been released from the hospital, we were back in the ER and he had a CSF leak. And we were back in surgery the next morning. And and then after that, you know, the second surgery was a lot harder for him to come back from than the first. And somewhere along the line, someone had told me, you know, the more surgeries that you have, the more times they have to go in, the harder it becomes, and the more at risk you are to all sorts of different side effects and stuff. But, you know, then after that, we were kind of like, okay, cool, we're over it. When he started going back to work like a month later, and then the headaches came back. And, you know, I wish somebody had done an MRI sooner. I wish I had known to ask for an MRI sooner, but I didn't. I had no idea. I just hoped and prayed that it wasn't what I thought it was. And it was. And we didn't find out until 3 months after, because that's when our next MRI was scheduled. And I guess that's just how the insurance does it. I'm not exactly sure. We went to the ER like maybe 2 months after he got out of surgery because of the headaches were back, and they said they couldn't tell anything because they did a CAT scan, not an MRI. I didn't know to ask for an MRI. I had no idea. I didn't even know the difference between a CAT scan and an MRI. And at the time, they just thought he just was having headaches, and you can just have headaches. But it was the brain tumor. It was back. And by the time we knew about it, it was already growing so rapidly that it was pressing on his optic nerve again. They were afraid that he was going to go blind. And it's just, I wish that I could go back and tell my pre-brain tumor self, you're going to go through a whole lot of heck before you get to the other side. Because I don't think that any of them really know, so it's nobody's fault, because everybody that goes through it is different. Everybody's experience is different. But I really, truly, when we got out of surgery, I thought, whew, okay, wow, that's over. Let's get you better and get you back to work, But I had no idea. I had no idea that he was going to go through 12 months of chemo. I had no idea that he was going to have health issues for the rest of his life. I mean, they tried to prep me, but I don't think that you ever really know until it happens. The biggest thing I think is that trying to get people who are in this situation, any type of person, well, you asked me earlier, like, what I wish that people had, like, if I'd known before or whatever. I wish that somebody had walked into the hospital room and handed me a packet and said, here's the contact information for every charitable organization in the city of Jacksonville that can help you. Here's the contact information for the top 20 neurosurgeons in the Northeast Florida region. Here's information. Here's what you need to know about how to deal with your insurance company. And I realize every insurance company is different and every policy is different, but like, here's some tips on how to deal. Like, we had no idea that you have to get, at least with our insurance policy, you have to get a, what do they call it? You have to get approval before, pre-authorization. You have to get a pre-authorization for like so many different things. I had no idea. I mean, I just thought, okay, I pay a lot of money for insurance every month, but no, you have to get authorization for his MRIs, which he has to have all the time, for different procedures. We had no idea. And then you have to fight the insurance company afterwards just to get it covered. And that's a nightmare. And so I wish that somebody had put together something for me to read to say, here's some pointers on all these different areas that you're going to need to know. Here's information about like how you need to start budgeting your life, because 6 months down the line, you're going to start getting bills. And even though people are going to be compassionate, they're also going to want their money. So you better be prepared, because these bills are going to be massive, massive amounts of money that you're going to owe. And at the time when you're sitting in a hospital room and you think your husband's dying, you don't care about any of that. But I wish somebody had told me that I needed to be prepared for that. So back to your last question about Sue and the organization, that's something that I think that, we're not in Rochester, we're not residents of Minnesota, so we really don't get to benefit from the organization like the people locally in the community do. But just my limited experience with Sue, of course, who is an amazing human being, and the one meeting we got to go to, and just all the things that she told me about it, that they're trying so hard to provide every single need that people in this situation have. And the people of Rochester are so lucky to have it because, you know, maybe when you are in a hospital room at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, maybe they do hand you a packet. I have no idea, but they definitely don't do it in Jacksonville, not even at Mayo. And I think that just that walking someone through the steps is like, to me, is the most important thing, because I did not have that until I met Sue. I really didn't. The people at Mayo Jacksonville are amazing, wonderful, brilliant doctors, but I kind of felt like almost like,
Alone.
yeah, I felt alone. I felt like we were on a hamster wheel, you know, like we were never going to be able to get off because I didn't understand why this tumor was coming back, why it was such, you know, if it's not cancer, why is it being this way? Why won't it leave us alone? That's what I felt like. I don't understand why. And I don't know that anybody really had answers for me, but it wasn't really until I met Sue that I felt like someone was gonna hold my hand.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, something that you would want to say to someone else is not only do you need a good team of doctors, but you need a good support person that will, you know, look out for your behalf the whole time. Because if it wasn't for her and Mayo, I'd be dead. And you see how she talks and asks questions, or she asks millions of questions. she was told by a doctor that you should be a doctor by now because you know everything about it. And you really need that to get through it the right way.
Yeah, you definitely need a good support team, because I cannot imagine going through something like this by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just the physical aspect of it. You're really, really, really sick. And like in his case, he was really, really confused.
Yeah, and if it hadn't been for her being there every minute of every day while I was pulling the IVs out of my arms and trying to pull that thing that was in my back out, if she hadn't been right there right at that minute to tell the doctors and call them back in there, I mean, I'd have been dead several times.